50 years ago, the health of the Great Lakes was in such distress that it prompted the seminal bilateral Great Lakes Water Quality Agreement between Canada and the United States. Douglas Hallett is a former chief scientist at Environment Canada and a UN silver medalist for advocacy for environmental stewardship. He spent the last half century studying pollution in the Great Lakes, and Douglas Hallett joins us now. Welcome, Doug.
Thank you.
All right, so this year the Great Lakes Water Quality Agreement turns 50.
Yes, sir.
Signed 1972. In 1978, you authored amendments to that same agreement, broadening the approaches to how to address many sources of toxins in there. And your focus was on the dirty dozen, toxic chemicals. What were those dirty dozen?
It started with DDT and DDE and PCBs and mercury and sort of things that were quite well known. By that time, I had discovered there were 382 chemicals in the gulls and fish that I was looking at, but I realized they came from all the same sources that the really big ones that we knew a little bit more about. These were very early days for these chemicals that we knew a little bit about, and that they were toxic, that they were persistent, and that they bioaccumulated up the food chain. So I was working with the US EPA. I was then on international committees, and my colleague, one of my best friends, my colleague Wayland Swain, who's passed on, but he was an inspiration to me, and there were other people writing the Toxic Substances Control Act in the US. We had written the Environmental Contaminants Act in Canada. It was promulgated in 1978. And so in writing that, he and I coined this phrase, the dirty dozen. And we sort of did an analysis, and we realized that if you get rid of these dirty dozen, you're going to get rid of the other 384. So let's just focus on what people know about and get that done. That's where the dirty dozen came from. Most importantly, I was the discoverer of dioxin in the Great Lakes.
Right.
And that was one of the dirty dozen as well.
You do mention in some of your writing that forever chemicals, and I want to get an understanding of what forever chemicals are. People may assume that once chemicals are dumped in there, at some point they're being flushed out or they're going somewhere, but they stay in the water for quite a while. What do we mean by forever chemicals?
Forever chemicals is a new phrase, and it's kind of a don't disturb the public phrase, forever chemicals. And it sounds like something you'd say to your girlfriend. But anyway, these chemicals, the new ones, are not chlorinated like PCBs or DDT or chlorinated dioxins. They're fluorinated and brominated. But fluorine, bromine, and chlorine are three what are called halogens that are joined on to organic molecules that are made up, they're hydrocarbons, that are made up of hydrogen and carbon. And then there's a chlorine bound here, and now it's fluorine. And these are refrigerants. And there's a role for these in our society. We need refrigerants.
Right.
We need dielectric fluids like PCBs. We need brominated fire retardants so that children's clothes don't catch on fire, as examples. So that's what these forever chemicals are. And since I left government service in 1986, and having done all that work on the getting toxic substances into an international agreement and working on these other pieces of legislation, it's appalling to see that there's a whole class of new chemicals that are called forever chemicals that have been created that are out there in Lake Ontario today and all of the Great Lakes, accumulating up the ecosystem from the water to the plankton to the fish to the gulls to the people. And I emphasize that. We are all part of this ecosystem. People are.
I want to pick up on that. You yourself have called yourself a scientist turned environmentalist. You've been advocating for the health of the Great Lakes and their adjacent communities for over 5 decades. When we look at sort of the role that Canada and Ontario specifically have to play, have they been complacent on that front?
It's important to realize that you can clean these things up, that it doesn't have to be the way it is. And as I said, I'm appalled that a whole class of chemicals have been created since I left government service. They've been created and are out there contaminating the environment, and they bioaccumulated and they are in everyone's body that lives around here. It's not just gulls and fish and bugs and bunnies that we're talking about. We're talking about us. And that happened again. And it's wrong. It didn't have to be that way, and we've got to be more vigilant and stay with the program.
Is it fair to say that there has been some progress made in eliminating some toxins over the last few decades?
I'm not here as a politician. I'm here to state what it is. And there has been progress made. And it's because people know about it. It's because industry knows about it. I destroyed all the PCBs that General Motors Canada had in the late 1990s. They were proud to do that. I employed Canadian people doing that. And GM was glad they got rid of this stuff. Others need to do the same. It's why I'm involved now as a businessman, because I realize that you can make all the policy you like, but if you can make money at this, it will prevail, that people will continue to do this. And I believe that will happen with the right guidance from government on the Great Lakes.
I want to talk about public opinion. Your work about the dangers of living with chemicals was controversial in the 70s, 80s, so much so that you left your post. When it comes to chemicals in our water and food, how do you think popular public opinion differs now from when it was back then?
They don't know anymore. The information isn't out there to them. It is not presented. I hope this program becomes the beginning of doing it again, because it's so important. People's view of scientists with COVID has gone downhill, and that the science behind COVID and getting those dealing with it the way it was done scientifically has what saved the world. And we need to realize we need to save ourselves from these forever chemicals. We can't have more of them, or they just need to be managed better. It's like plastic. We've got plastic here, there. If you walk into your drugstore, everything is plastic. It's very important to our society, but it just needs to be managed better. And there needs to be guidance. People need to believe the scientists about this. It's not just to say plastic's bad, it's to say plastic can be made into this, plastic can be made into that, and reused and recycled. And we need to have every chemical, so there's a cyclic nature to that chemical, that people see it being made, they see it being used, and ultimately they see it being remade back to probably what it was in the first place, and then the cycle begins again. Everything has to have a cycle to it. We've missed that part with plastic particularly.
There has been a lot of progress when we look back from 50 years ago to now in terms of the Great Lakes. And I'm curious how can we reverse some of the damage we've done to these lakes, or what work needs to continue in order to get it to a level where, we're not too concerned?
It's important for people that live here to realize they are part of this ecosystem. Lake Ontario, near Toronto here, or which Toronto is part of, has a half-time of the water in it of 7 years. So when you put something in there,
Right.
it doesn't flush down the toilet. It's there for a half-time of 7 years. And people say, well, won't it sink to the bottom? A limnologist or someone that studies lakes knows in this area of the world that there is a turnover every spring and every fall of the water, where the water at the top gets heavier than the water at the bottom, and the bottom water comes up to the top, and the top water goes to the bottom just because of the temperature. Now, Lake Erie has a very short half-time. It's only 2 years.
Right.
But Lake Huron, and particularly Lake Superior has a half-time of 70 years. So that's the other part of this forever chemical stuff that's so important for people to say, you put a forever chemical in there, it'll be in there for the next couple of centuries. And we can't do that.
Doug, that's all the time we have, but I really appreciate you giving us some really insightful stuff and your time as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is made possible through generous philanthropic contributions from viewers like you. Thank you for supporting TVO's journalism.